You guys, I'm in a blazer, a flowery blouse, a pencil skirt, and pumps, so you know it's going to get serious really quickly. So my name is Rachel Gattuso. I'm going to talk to you today about a topic I'm actually incredibly passionate about, which is the overhead myth. It's something that resonates with me, and it's my soapbox, so you're going to get 5 minutes of it, and I hope you enjoyed it. I work in the nonprofit industry. Charity is not a new concept. Since the days of the Greeks, you show up at my door and I will take care of you. We've been at this. We've been dealt a big hand. We've been dealing with hunger, homelessness, poverty, gaps in healthcare, you name it. The charity world comes to the plate. And yet it's 2017 and we are not finished. We're still dealing with hunger, homelessness, poverty, and gaps in healthcare. This is the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, because we have not changed our approach and how we view nonprofits in giving them permission to deal with these huge societal problems. Thank you. So usually the number one question a donor asks before they give dollars to a cause is, how will my dollars be used? You guys, this is a super noble question, but I want to tell you, when I hear it, 9 times out of 10, it translates to, God forbid my dollars are used on overhead. Overhead is classified typically as rent, power and utilities, salaries, advertising costs. I implore you, any of your business, consider if you could make that expenditure of all of these categories with just 20%, and you tell me how you function. So the overhead myth basically states that for every dollar, 80% should go to the mission versus 20% that goes to overhead. It's the 80-20% rule for nonprofits. But it cuts out people, and that's because people like to give in the way they want to give. Typically, it's very emotional. If it's misguided, it will actually divest resources from the charity and its cause, and it's a lot of times financially ignorant if somebody restricts the funds. Holy crap. And that's basically, so when we tell our nonprofits, you have to have a status quo approach, we sometimes get puzzled by the fact that we have a status quo result, and that's not fair. We've determined that nonprofits don't get to function in the same way. So when I give $10, typically a donor says, I'd rather that $10 go to ingredients for 4 sandwiches versus paying somebody's hourly salary to pay and produce 40 sandwiches. And we think that way because we don't think people are a part of the mission, and yet they inherently are so. People drive actions. They drive results. They move the needle from A to B. People are a part of the process when it comes to any charity and any cause. So the overhead myth basically says nonprofits can't attract nor retain top talent from the for-profit world. They can't invest in approaches that take time, and they can't advertise to wrestle market share away from the for-profit companies. Is it smarter to literally spend only 18% and net $400, or is it more financially responsible to spend 30% in overhead and net $400,000? Okay? So this is what happened, actually, in a very notable case with the Wounded Warrior Project, where the top 2 executives were ousted from the company for making about a tenth of what a video game CEO made in the same calendar year, okay? We have a very visceral reaction to somebody in the charity world making a profit, when instead, if you make video violent games, it's totally cool. And yet these guys at Wounded Warrior Project funneled $262 million back to an underserved population. Don't get me started, but if you are in a nonprofit world, absolutely we should be good stewards of our donor dollars. That's not what I'm advocating. But people are a part of the process. So when you make an assessment about a nonprofit, you can't sit there and haggle whether there's a huge overhead rate. We have to drop the overhead myth. It halves the nonprofit world's ability to actually tackle these very long-term systemic problems. So instead, I'm imploring you, please, when you assess a nonprofit, ask, what are their goals? What's their culture like? Have they demonstrated growth? Do they have measurable objectives in place? Do they have a strategy for the future? These are all effective questions we need to be asking our nonprofits, not did they keep their overhead costs low. Ask instead, are my dollars affecting change? And before I conclude, please take out your cameras and take a quick Snapchat or a picture that will actually stay on your camera of the next slide, because all of these resources, I'm basically espousing some of my heroes' words. Dan Pallotta, the way we think about charity is wrong. There's a lot more about the Wounded Warrior Project and how they got lambasted in the press for this approach. And don't forget 211. It's a local listing of resources in this area. Boom. Let's have a drink.